What's going on, Wolfpack? Welcome back. Welcome, Mike, in the words of the Godfather himself, to another episode of Market Watch Mondays. Hopefully, this is your favorite show of the week. It is definitely one of my favorite ones to record because I get to talk about whatever it is I want to talk about, specifically when it comes to Dynasty strategy. For those of you guys that are new to the channel that don't know me, my name is Mike. You can find me at MikeMeUp with 2 P's on Twitter. We started a lot of things on this channel, and it's been a good ride. So really like the fact that all of you guys have been sticking with me. Those of you guys who are OGs, those of you guys who are part of the Wolf Pack, the Fantasy Football Wolf Pack, over on Patreon, patreon.com/ourpack. Again, just for nerdy guys like me and girls, hopefully get some girls in there, but nerdy folks like me who really like to dive into the numbers, the strategy, the game theory behind Dynasty. If that is for you, make sure you head on over and check that shit out. But enough of the promos. I want to get to the content today. Today we're going to be recording a pretty, a special episode because I'm actually recording on Friday today because I'm going to be in Hawaii for the next week for vacation. But we could not forget about the Wolf Pack, forget about y'all out there. So got to make sure it came out here and drop the content before I dipped. So that's why I'm recording early today, but you'll still be seeing this on your regularly scheduled 2 a.m. for all you midnight owls out there, 2 a.m. Pacific time when it drops on the channel and on the pod. So let's get started. Actually, you know what? Wait, sorry, I forgot. Before we get started, man, y'all know what time it is by this time. It is time to hit that intro, baby. All right, this week I got a few topics I want to talk about, stuff that have come up, just through Twitter. A couple of old topics I just want to really bring back to the forefront and refresh people on. Some things that came up that I basically did a show with Roto Street, I think Roto Street Wolf, or another Wolf, self-proclaimed Wolf Pack and Wolf Pack member, but Wolf Roto Street, I forget his Twitter handle. I'll link it down in the comments below, but it's Roto Street Wolf. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Wolf of Roto Street. Really, really clever handle. Obviously a play on the Wolf of Wall Street, which is obviously, as you guys know, one of my favorite movies, the intro to this show itself. But I was talking with him on a couple topics, and one topic that just came up in discussion that I really want to reiterate for people here is the topic of value cliff versus age cliff, production cliff for Dynasty format playing of fantasy football, right? I don't know why I said it like that. That was actually kind of weird. But basically, there are two time periods or timetables that you're playing towards in Dynasty, right? One of the biggest inputs is production and how players produce, but another big, massive input when it comes to Dynasty, because you are playing over for the long haul, is the age of a player. So oftentimes, the value cliff and the age cliff are not the same thing. You would think that they are, right? Players would fall off, when they stop producing, because that's really what you're trying to tell with age, because, the older players get, the less they produce typically, right? But what you actually see in Dynasty is, the value cliff for players comes way before the production cliff does. And part of that is trying to stay ahead of the curve, right? That's what I'm all about in this channel, and I'm always trying and stay one step ahead of the curve when it comes to my rankings, when it comes to the value side of things. But that's just part of the game. Everyone's trying to get out early. So as a result, you can kind of play a little bit of arbitrage between the gap between the two. And I'll give you an example. The best example of this is probably at wide receiver, right? You'll see wide receiver value kind of take a massive hit once they hit the age of 28 or so, right? So if you think about DeAndre Hopkins, right? If you look at his value last season versus the season before, where he was constantly going probably top 6, top 8 picks in Superflex drafts, he fell, pretty frequently to the late second, sometimes even early third last year. And that's part of switching new teams. That's part of the age, but he's not the only one, right? You look at Odell Beckham. You look at, a lot of these guys in the past. What happens is once they hit that age, people are looking to sell. So usually what I do is I try and get out a year earlier, right? You hear this all the time. It's better to be a year early than a year late, and that's true in a lot of instances, right? So what I do, and the reason why I have wide receiver trade down strategy as a pillar of my dynasty approach, is I try and get out on wide receivers when they are at the peak, because wide receivers are so replaceable, right? And you can always trade down, and that's some of the best value accrual strategy that I have, is just trading down at wide receiver. I'm trading out at the peak of these wide receivers before they hit that value cliff. So someone like a Davante Adams, right? I'm exploring offers for him now. Like, if I have Davante Adams on my team, is he going to be washed up? No, he's still going to produce for the next 1, 2, 3 years. But the thing is, you can get out on him at like top 3, top 4 wide receiver value now for someone that's younger and maybe like a rookie pick, someone like a potentially maybe someone even like a Jamar Chase plus a future first, if you have to give back Davante Adams plus a second, right? It might be hard to do right now because Jamar Chase hype is so high, but something along those lines, or like a Davante Adams for, like a Calvin Ridley plus like a future pick. Like, these are all deals that I usually try and get done at this point in the season. Like last year, before the start of last season, I was trading DeAndre Hopkins. I was trying to get something like Calvin Ridley plus a first, or DK Metcalf plus a first, before these guys broke out, right? The value cliff comes at age 28. But if you look at the elite guys, right, the truly elite guys, the guys like Julio Jones, right, they are producing well into their early 30s, right? Now, Jerry Rice is a god amongst men, so he produced well into his late 30s. That's not normal, but you will see them produce pretty well into their late 20s to early 30s. So there is a gap between when their peak value is highest before it falls off a cliff, and then when their production actually falls off a cliff. And the way Dynasty viewers game, it's almost as if production falls off a cliff at the same time, and that's not true. So what can you do with this information? Typically, when you sell a player when their value is at its peak, and then I try and grab players where their production is outweighing their value. So basically, when production's going like this and the value goes down like this, and the production is just like slowly declining or holding flat, those are the players you really want to add to your championship contending rosters, right? Because those are the players that are going to give you the points, and those are the players you're going to be able to get at a cheaper price than, some of these much more coveted younger assets that might not even be producing as well. So some examples this year would be someone like a Keenan Allen, right? Keenan Allen has been one of the most consistent wide receivers, since he joined the league, right? We heard about the injury prone narratives, and ever since that 1 year where he was out, he's been one of the most available wide receivers. He's just consistently put up wide receiver 1 after wide receiver 1 after wide receiver 1 season. And now, if you look at him, he's already hit the value cliff, right? He's past age 28. He's already 29 years old. People are already leaving him for dead. But if we look at what's happened with the team itself, what do? They added Justin Herbert, right? People were worried about what would life be like after Phillip Rivers, because Phillip Rivers was the one that was feeding Keenan Allen, right? Keenan Allen was being made by Phillip Rivers. And that's just a load of baloney, right? Because Keenan Allen is just a really, really elite player. He is a top-end wide receiver and has been ever since he joined the league. And now his career has basically been extended by adding a Justin Herbert, because we know what Justin Herbert's been able to do as a rookie. Historically great in terms of his production, historically great in terms of all the advanced metrics that matter. So now you pair Justin Herbert with Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen is that guy. He is that outlet underneath. He is the easy target for a Justin Herbert, him and Austin Eckler. It's going to be a very, very concentrated target volume on that offense between those two players. So I'm very much in on Keenan Allen this year. So if you are a contending roster, you should be going out there and acquiring Keenan Allen. You should be doing it, on your rookie drafts, right? If you're a contending roster, you probably have a late first, right? Instead of spending that late first on one of these young rookie wide receivers, as tantalizing as that might be, you are much better off paying that first to acquire the services of someone like a Keenan Allen, right? Keenan Allen, someone that's definitely past the value cliff, but his production cliff has not even come close to hitting it. He is going to be productive for the next 2 years at least, if not more than that. So just given how his play style translates, he's an absolute technician, right? Another player like that is Michael Thomas, right? Michael Thomas is right now, like in best ball drafts and underdogs, I'm getting him in the third round like every single time, right? Anytime Michael Thomas or Keenan Allen is there in the third round, I've basically been splitting between those two people because they are target hogs. Their target volume, they've shown the peaks, and in Dynasty, like really elite players don't just fall off it for 1 year. We know Michael Thomas had problems with ankles that he played through hurt last year because he didn't want to waste the last season with Drew Brees. So he's got that surgery. So coming back, he's going to be a healthy Michael Thomas, one of the most prolific producers in the NFL of all time. So I'm not worried about, whoever plays QB there for Michael Thomas, because even under Taysom Hill, Michael Thomas is rocking like a 30% target share. Obviously, it's on lower pass attempts, but that's still a pretty decent chunk in order to get him there. But Michael Thomas, again, is basically hitting that age cliff, right? People don't want to acquire Michael Thomas. Like, once you hit 28 years old, the reason why there's an age cliff is because there aren't as many people in your league willing to pay for that player anymore, because anyone that's rebuilding or 1 or 2 years out doesn't want to add that old player. So they're just not going to pay the price that they want. So you're basically limiting the supply of trade partners down to whoever is willing to pay for them, and that's only the top contending teams, which in some leagues could only be 1, 2, 3 teams. So two or three guys is determining the value from a demand supply perspective. Versus, if you have young assets, like everybody wants them, right? Like contenders, rebuilders, doesn't matter. Everyone wants a Justin Jefferson on their team. So Michael Thomas is in a unique position where he's an elite producer. Do I expect him to repeat his 2019 season? Probably not, because that was a historic season in terms of volume. He got like 180 plus targets. That's not normal, but 150 targets is very much in the realm of possibility for a Michael Thomas. And I'm expecting it to be Jameis Winston, because I think Jameis Winston's a much better quarterback than Taysom Hill. So you're going to get value from guys like that. So if I'm building championship contending teams, I'm going to be going after guys like that who have passed the value cliff. Another example would be someone like a Robert Woods, right? Robert Woods is just perennially underrated. He is constantly going to be like that middling wide receiver 2, which isn't sexy because he's not, posting like massive games or whatever, although he does have some pretty boom games in him as well. But he's someone that's he's someone just great to have in your wide receiver corps as that wide receiver 2-3. Like Robert Woods on most of my teams, he's like wide receiver 3 or 4. And when you have wide receiver 3 or 4, you're looking for guys that can put up wide receiver 2 numbers. Like anything past wide receiver, like top 20, like points per game, like differential on the wide receiver, it's like you don't really care about it as much, although that bracket's getting a little bit wider from like mid to low wide receiver 2. But you want that like high end wide receiver 2 upside from your wide receivers. And Robert Woods is also past the age cliff where people just aren't willing to pay for him if they're rebuilders. So what that means is, for those of you that are contenders, especially if Robert Woods is on a rebuilding team, they're going to be looking to dump these guys, and they're going to be looking to dump them for a discount because they're trying to get points off their team. They're trying to look towards the future. They're trying to get younger guys. So again, like if you're sitting there at that, I'd say at the top of the second round, and you're a contending team, you should be going after someone like a Robert Woods, because he's going to produce for another couple of years. Again, he's another player where he hasn't relied heavily on his athleticism to kind of like break away. He's just another technician. And those types of games, I think, translate a lot better over time as their athleticism falls off than compared to someone like a DK Metcalf or an A.J. Brown, for example, who are just absolute freaks when it comes to athleticism. So those are 3 guys that I think, everyone should be going for if you're a contending roster, and really taking advantage of the value cliff versus the age cliff. And the understanding that these are 2 completely different things is really how you build Dynasty. I mean, there's a lot of teams where I will trade someone like a Davante Adams at his peak, like right now, or even last year. Sometimes I traded Davante Adams. Obviously, he went off for the historic season, but I wasn't really trying to win on those teams. But I would trade him there, and then maybe 1 or 2 years down the line, when that team is no longer a competing team, I'm going to go back and look to try and grab them back. Like, think about someone like a Julio Jones, right? If you traded Julio Jones when he was like 27, 28 years old, you probably would have got an absolute massive haul, right, when he was like 27 years old. So you traded a year early because Julio Jones continues to produce, but now you could have got him back last year, the year before last year. You can still get him back this year, and Julio Jones is still probably going to put up wide receiver 1 production because he is that elite of a talent, right? The guys that last that long, right, they are elite. So it's a little bit of survivorship bias when you look at like the age curve of when production falls off, because obviously the good players play for longer and they produce better, whereas the bad players just stop playing. So that's why you get that kind of effect, but it's important to understand that effect and understand that discrepancy so that when you are making moves in your own leagues, you can make sure you're best positioned to take upon that value and push your team into the next level by pivoting off rookie picks, right? I always talk about how I trade out of rookie picks a lot in my rookie drafts after I like basically hoard all of them and control the market. And if I'm trading out of that latter part of the first round, like these are the types of guys I'm trying to go for on my competitive teams. And it's better to do it now. I've covered this concept before, but if I'm a true top contender, I know that going into the season, I'm prepaying for depth right now, right? I'm prepaying for depth before injuries hit me, right? I want to have players ready to go. I want to be 2, 3, 4 starters deep so that if an injury hits, I can slot someone else in, right? I don't have to be scrambling and overpaying for guys. It's like paying for insurance, right? Instead of waiting for the catastrophe to happen to then load up on everything, you're paying a little bit of an insurance premium up front. You're getting them for cheaper because now is a really good time to buy veterans again because it's still rookie hype season. So you can prepay for that and then have that depth already on your teams. Like those are my most successful teams, is ones where in the offseason I'm making moves already to build that depth. Depth is so important in Dynasty, and everyone's always focused on the starting lineup and how stacked their starting lineup is, right? But in seasons, especially now during like COVID and all this uncertainty going around, it's so important to have depth. It's truly the teams that have depth that actually make it through, because the only other way to make it through is if your team has like no injuries, which is actually really, really hard to do because it's a freaking violent sport we play, right? So I've always thought about it as in terms of prepaying for my insurance before going into the season instead of waiting for injuries to hit me and then acquiring the players, right? And the thing is, like, if you acquire these players, even if you don't use them, that's totally fine because you had them, and it's not like you're acquiring bums that are all going to be basically washed up. I'm not talking about acquiring a bunch of rentals that are going to be washed up in a year, right? These are still really, really good players, and they might not last as long, and they might not be as sexy as your rookie picks, but having them on your bench and having them to draw on and pull on for matchups, for injuries, for COVID, for whatever, that is how you make it through a championship season and get to the end, right? And the teams that don't do that, the teams that do only rely on their starting lineup and are super top heavy and only wait, what's going to happen then is you're going to have to pay like first plus to just get a filled-in running back because you've already committed to the win, right? You've already committed to the win, so you got to take those risks, and what ends up happening is you got to overpay when those risks don't work out. So that's why now is a great time to kind of implement some of this stuff. And I do this throughout all my Dynasty teams, right? Like in the offseason, especially before the rookie draft, during the rookie draft, after the rookie draft, during training camp hype, I'm always looking. If I wasn't able to trade out during the rookie draft, I have players and I have identified veterans and teams that I can partner with to basically build on my depth. And wide receiver is probably one of the easiest places to do that because they're so bountiful and there's a new injection of wide receiver talent this year and everyone's excited about them. But meanwhile, I'm over here still giddy about guys like Keenan Allen. I'm giddy about Michael Thomas. I'm giddy about Robert Woods. Like these guys are just, they're not like, Michael Thomas is probably a cornerstone. Keenan Allen might be, but like they're not necessarily cornerstones to building your team, but they are absolutely major, major contributors to get you that W at the end of the day. So that's what I'm all about. Make sure you build depth. Make sure you prepare. Make sure you stay ahead of the game in that way by taking advantage of the value cliff versus the production cliff for veteran players. All right. Another topic I want to talk about is, there's a lot of zero RB talk going on now because it's always zero RB versus, robust RB season. Personally, I don't really ascribe to like either one. I kind of just play the draft and kind of let it fall to me. But, there's a lot of merit for both. But one of the things that really irks me is when people say like, oh, look, like, you can get through the season with J.D. McKissick and like Nyheim Hines and like Tariq Cohen, these types of players. And because look at how much they scored, right? They scored, 200 points relative to some of the other running backs. And my only knock against that is like, yes, those guys scored those points, but how many of those points were actually in your lineup? And this is what I refer to as functional points, right? Like you can't just look at total points a player scores. That's better for best ball, right? Because best ball, you don't have to make lineup decisions, right? And if we've learned anything from the past, like most of us like are pretty bad at making lineup decisions. Like I play DFS and that helps me a lot, but even then, like you'll whiff on decisions when it comes to wide receivers and running backs, and especially for satellite backs. And why I'm so against drafting satellite backs and like because people are like, oh, it's PPR, they'll score a lot of points, whatever. You never know when those points are coming, right? And that's the problem. Like you have a bunch of wide receivers, right, on your team that are really good. So you got to make the decision there to see who to start and who to bench. And then you got to like try and figure out like, hey, which one of these crappy running backs am I going to play? Like, is it game script? Like, are they going to get a bunch of receptions this game? Like someone like a Nyheim Hines, like if you rostered him, yeah, it might look good. Like he finished like as an RB2 or whatever he did, or like a back end RB1 even in PPR scoring. But how many of those games was he actually on the field or in your starting lineup, right? Like, did you bench him for someone else one week and then, when he blew up, and then after you put him in, then he put up like 7 points? Like, that's what you get. Like, when I construct rosters, the way I think about it is I get safety and floor from my quarterback and my running back. Like, those are the players where I'm expecting you to give me that weekly floor. Like, I don't want to go out there and have my team score like 50 points because I have a bunch of boom bust guys that don't do anything. Like, I chase upside at the wide receiver position because trying to predict wide receivers is pretty damn hard, right? And, wide receivers, I want the boom bust. I want the upside. I want that week winning upside from Mike Evans to score like 50 points to help me win, because on the back end, hopefully I have like a CMC or a Saquon Barkley or other workhorse running backs that I've put in the running back slot to give me that floor accompanied with my quarterbacks. And my wide receivers is what's giving me upside. But if all you have is guys like Nyheim Hines and J.D. McKissic, like, you don't have a floor, because those guys can go out any given week and score you 5 to 7 points if they don't get, the 6 receptions that you were counting on them for. And it's really hard to try and determine when they're going to get those targets because they're not workhorses. The volume there is not very predictable, right? So in best ball, I totally understand, because that decision gets removed for you, right? You don't have to worry about making lineup decisions. You don't have to worry about starting or sitting Chris Godwin versus Justin Jefferson in order to start, Nyheim Hines or whatever in the flex, right? You don't have to make those types of decisions because the best scorer will play, right? And that is a totally different game, and that's where I can get more behind like the 0 RB drafting and all that stuff. But in season long, where you have to make lineup decisions, right? It's so much easier to have anchored around a couple of stud workhorse running backs that they have the highest functional points, and then chase upside at your wide receiver position. And there's plenty of upside to be had in rounds 3 to 8 in the single digit rounds for wide receiver. You can get wide receiver 1 upside there. You cannot get running back 1 upside there. Or it's very, very hard to get running back 1 upside there. But there's plenty of value from guys like the ones I've talked about, like Michael Thomas, Keenan Allen. These are guys, if they finish top 5 at wide receiver scoring, who would be surprised? Like, I sure wouldn't, right? But I would be very, very surprised if you're getting, Chris Carson as a top 5 running back finish this year, right? So for me, it really just comes down to the functionality of the points. Like, how functional are they? Are they actually in your lineup? Is it easy to make the decision to put them in your lineup to get those points? And if not, then those points, not all points are created equal. Like, 200 point season from Nyheim Hines is a lot different from a 200 point season from a stud running back that you knew you could start every week because of volume. So that's my main knock against that type of thinking. And, best ball is totally different story. 0 RB absolutely works there. The numbers are proven out, based on win percentages. And I do a lot of 0 RB drafting or modified 0 RB drafting on best ball. But in season long, it's a lot harder to make that case. And, people always say like, oh, well, they're the easiest lineups to improve because you can get, running backs off the waivers. Like, I mean, yeah, like sure. But again, most of these running backs you're getting like, you're getting them after they had a blow-up week. Like, after Nyheim Hines, J.D. McKissic has a blow-up week. Then you don't feel comfortable playing them. And then 2 weeks gone by, you haven't played them. And then the week you finally work up the courage to play them, what happens? They go in and score like 7 points in your lineup. So it's just a really, really frustrating way to play. And even then, like, you're not going to beat out someone that went stud running backs that faded injury. That's the other thing. Like, if you pick early in the draft and you go running back, right, and you fade injury, like, there's really not much anyone else can do. And, even 0 RB drafters even know that. Like, they're not going to beat out someone that goes CMC early and CMC fades injury, right? You're banking on other injuries. So you're banking on someone else's injury to kind of like uplift you to the other side. So it's just a different style to play. Not necessarily wrong. It's just not for me because of the functional points perspective that I'm talking about. It's really tough to get the most efficiency out of the players in terms of putting them in your starting lineups and getting them for the points that they score. And scat backs, I hate them. And the other thing with scat backs, I did a study on this. It was one of my first or second articles I ever wrote for Dynasty Nerds, but like the repeating RB1 seasons from those scat backs are like almost never. The only ones that ever repeat, the only scat backs you're interested in that ever repeat are ones that actually have a path to leading work on the ground. Someone like an Alvin Kamara that had a lot of receptions his rookie year, but you saw him take over on the ground as well and get those goal line carries, right? Someone like an Austin Eckler who started as a receiving back, but then worked his way into a significant portion of the groundwork. Those are the guys, and those aren't true scat backs because eventually they work, their talent wins out, and they prove out to be, stud, either workhorse or committee leading running backs. Nyheim Hines will never lead anything on the ground, right? As long as Jonathan Taylor's there. I mean, even if Jonathan Taylor wasn't there, he wouldn't lead anything on the ground. Guys like J.D. McKissic will never lead anything on the ground because Antonio Gibson is that guy, right? So you got to be careful with drafting scat backs. Personally, I fade scat backs like everywhere. Like I don't get them for Dynasty. I don't get them for redraft. They're just not worth the headache. I would much rather focus on getting my running backs early and then focusing on the wide receiver position than trying to like play nickel and dime with some of these scat backs. So I'm personally out on all of them. The only place, like I said, I would consider them as best ball because you don't have to make those lineup decisions. All right. Last thing I want to talk about is tight end. So tight end is a wasteland yet again. Every year, people are like, oh, like tight end's getting deep. A lot of rookie talent. This class was supposed to be really, really good tight end prospects. And then what happened? Brevin Jordan went out and put up an Elijah Holyfield combine performance, who was my tight end too before the combine or before the pro days. And then I just basically removed him from my ranks after he tested so poorly. But it's a wasteland again. And it comes back to the elite guys. And having these elite guys, especially in Dynasty, I think people really undervalue tight ends in Dynasty in non-tight end premium. I think people, for the most part, overvalue tight ends in tight end premium, especially the non-big three tight ends. They overvalue them because of scoring. They think the scoring matters, but really it doesn't. I've covered that a bunch prior to this, so I won't go too deep into that. But in Dynasty, you can't stream tight ends. It's not like redraft where you can stream like a tight end matchup where you're just trying to play for a touchdown, right? Like most of the tight ends are all rostered by all the teams, so you only have the tight ends on your team to play with. And in that type of scenario, I'm much more willing. I've always been more willing to pay up for tight end in Dynasty because that's one, it provides a couple of benefits, right? One, it gives you a huge scoring and positional advantage, one of the biggest scoring and positional advantages you can get in Dynasty, in fantasy football, sorry. Two, it gives you ease of mind, right? You don't have to worry about like trying to pick like between Adam Troutman and freaking Mike Gesicki and trying to get the guy who gets a touchdown versus the guy who basically play Russian roulette and the guy who puts up like a freaking goose egg in your tight end lineup. That happens more often than you would like. So those two things is really cool, but also it saves you roster spots, right? Like if you roster an elite tight end, there's really not much of a need to roster a bunch of others, except I do it because I feel like, again, that's a really easy market to corner if you have like 2 or 3 of the top 5 tight ends and you kind of basically dominate the market. So I like going young tight end along with an elite tight end, but that's usually my draft strategy, right? I love going elite tight end in Dynasty and paying up a little bit for them and then, pairing them up with a couple of high upside guys later that are a little bit cheaper. Now, normally I'd go for like rookies, but this year you're not going to get Kyle Pitts for anything cheap. So that's not going to work, but you can still get some high upside guys later on in the draft, guys like Cole Kmet. I'm still in on OJ Howard. Those guys are super cheap. So, but the reason I want to talk about it is because I still think this is the 3rd year in a row now. Last year I said this and a bunch of people in the comments got, went all up crazy and was like that's craziness. But I said Darren Waller last year was the best tight end value in the game, and he was going at tight end 7 in ADP in like the middling rounds, like the 5th, 6th, 7th round. He was going around where guys like Evan Ingram were going, and I thought that was wild, right? And every draft I did, I was like, wow, I'm gonna click the smash button on Darren Waller every single time because he put up an absolutely elite season, right? He put up one of the best seasons we've ever seen from a tight end the year before last year, and then last year he did it again, right? If we look at Darren Waller in terms of the advanced metrics, like he is at the top of the list in almost everything. He ranked 10th overall in yards per route run, which is an efficiency metric from Pro Football Focus, and that's amongst all receivers. Anyone with more than 50 targets, Darren Waller was top 10, right? So as a tight end. And then if you look at just tight ends, he was, of course, he ranked 3rd after just George Kittle and Travis Kelce. So those are the 3 elite guys. And then if you look at his receiving grade, he was 4th overall. So I think it went Travis Kelce, Davante Adams, and then Darren Waller in terms of the receivers. So Darren Waller is elite, and I harp on PFF grades all the time because for college they aren't that useful. But when it comes to the NFL, they do have some use. They're pretty good. They're pretty sticky in terms of their ability to grade players within the NFL. Mainly because in college it's hard taking into account the competition factor, so the grades don't take that into account. So obviously it doesn't really work out. But in the NFL, you're all on the same playing field, so it's a lot better. So again, ranks number 4th or top 5 in PFF grade for receiving. And then if we look at his yak, he ranks number 2 in the league in yards after the catch. The only player with more yards after the catch than Darren Waller is Alvin Kamara, who we know is an obvious god in the receiving game, and also he's a running back, so it's a little bit different. But Darren Waller is just a really, really top end player. And if you look at his situation, right, nothing has really changed. Last year when I said this, what did people say? They're like, oh man, he was only getting fed because out of necessity, because they had no one else to throw to, right? And now they've added Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards and Lynn Bowden and all these third round wide receivers, and there's no way. And Josh Jacobs is going to get more of a target volume, so there's no way there's enough room for Darren Waller. Obviously, that proved to be false, right? And now, if we look at this year, really nothing else has changed. They still just have Henry Ruggs. Probably he'll take a step forward, but how big of a step forward? Probably not that big. They'll have Bryan Edwards. Hopefully he's healthy and able to take a step forward as well. But Darren Waller is going to lead the team in targets again this year. I said that last year, and I'm going to say it again. And I think maybe now people have finally caught on because he's finally going as the third tight end off the board. But he's still going significantly later than both Travis Kelce and George Kittle in some instances. So if I'm able to grab a Darren Waller in the third, fourth round, I am absolutely going to click that button because, like I said, it gives me the benefit of being able to put him into my slot, kind of like a set it and forget it. What's that? There's like a old infomercial back in the day. It was like a rotisserie chicken bakery thing. It's like, I think it's like Ron Stewart or something. You set it and forget it. That's what I like to do with my tight ends in Dynasty. I don't want to have to play the tight end streaming game, trying to string together 10 points per game between all my trash tight ends, right? I want to put Darren Waller in there, him get me the 14, 15 points per game advantage that he's supposed to get me, and just go from there. Like, I'm having a hard time right now distinguishing between George Kittle and Darren Waller in my ranks. I have both of them ahead of Travis Kelce, actually, just because of age alone. They're both a couple years younger. But, George Kittle is obviously, a top-end tight end. But from a fantasy perspective, like, Darren Waller has a path to a lot more targets, right? Like, George Kittle's playing with Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. I think both will lead their respective teams in targets. But San Francisco, obviously, also a little bit more run-heavy. So, and they're both around, similar age. They're both in their prime. They're both going to be productive for the next at least 2 to 3 years, right? Darren Waller has less injury issues. Darren Waller and Kittle are both athletic freaks when it comes to tight end. That's another key, right? But I've basically recently moved my ranks where, like, Darren Waller and George Kittle are only a few picks apart now. And that's definitely not where they're going in ADP. Like, in ADP, Darren Waller is going, around 2 rounds later than George Kittle and Travis Kelce. So that's why I say he is still the best value, even with his price pushed up, right? Grabbing him over grabbing a wide receiver in those rounds, I think, is still probably more beneficial for your dynasty teams. And, in the past, like, all of my championship dynasty teams, for the most part, have an elite tight end on them because it's such a big point advantage and just such a big lineup decision I don't have to worry about, such a roster freeing move. So I urge you guys this year, do not be scared off of the price for Darren Waller, because I think even now he is still the best value at tight end. He is my current dynasty tight end 2. I think most people have him as a tight end 3 or tight end 4. Most people have Kyle Pitts ahead of Darren Waller. And depending on the team, I could see you make a case for Kyle Pitts because he's a generational prospect. But if you're on any type of contending roster, you should be drafting Darren Waller ahead of Kyle Pitts, in my opinion, as good as Kyle Pitts is. And the thing is, if you have Kyle Pitts, or if you draft Kyle Pitts, you can probably get Darren Waller plus for him, right? You trying to get Kyle Pitts right now is damn near impossible. And and do I think he'll have a pretty damn good season for a first year? I think he will, because he landed in a really good spot. But is he going to be the difference maker that Darren Waller is, putting up like 1,200 to 1,400 yards, 130, 140 targets, and like 90-ish catches? Like, I don't think so. So as a contending roster, in tight end premium, in tight end, whatever, what have you, I think Darren Waller is the guy to go after, because he's still a lot cheaper than George Kittle, and he's still cheaper than Travis Kelce. Like, if Darren Waller, man, was on the Kansas City Chiefs, there would be records shattered, like single season records shattered, because he's such a freaking beast. Or if like Aaron Rodgers goes to Las Vegas Raiders somehow, obviously I don't know if that's true, but there's a, like, that was one of the rumor mills that were floating around. Like, having a real quarterback that actually looks at him downfield would be awesome, because the amount of times that Derek Carr does not look downfield after Darren Waller has burned the entire secondary is frustrating to watch. And also, for some reason they don't target him as much in the red zone. Same issue as George Kittle. Like, neither of them are really big TD producers, but that's why in tight end premium, where it's more like weighted towards the reception front, they're going to provide you a massive advantage. So I'm a big fan of Darren Waller. I tweeted about it last year. I tweeted again this year. I mean, this is going to be the third year in a row where Darren Waller is the best value at the position. And look, I love Hawkinson. I love Noah Fant. I love some of these young guys. But if you are in any form of competitive team that you're trying to win this year, Darren Waller is still your guy. So if you're in startup drafts, right, and your team's starting to take shape after a couple of rounds, and you want to grab like a Darren Waller, don't hesitate to do it, because like I said, he's still young. He's still in his prime, so it's not like that locks you in to go all in. You still have that flexibility, but it's worth it to spend up on a tight end, in my opinion, than to try and play the roulette and try and draft like 4 or 5 guys down the line. And a lot of those guys, especially in tight end premium, the younger guys, their value has pushed up the board unnecessarily. So even if you wanted to grab a treasure trove of those young guys in tight end premium, it's going to be tough. The only time you can probably do more of that strategy is when it's non-tight end premium. But even then, I'm seeing young guys get pushed up quite a bit. So instead of investing multiple picks, personally, I would rather just lock down the production with one singular pick. So that's all I got for you guys this week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I think this week, like I said, this episode will kind of come out in a regular scheduled time, and then I'll be in Hawaii all of next week. I'm going to try and basically stay off Twitter, so I'll be out of the box a little bit. I'll try and hop on the Discord for the Patreon members, because I got you guys' backs. But for the most part, I'm going to be trying to enjoy my vacation with my girlfriend in Hawaii. It'll be my first time going there, so I'm pretty damn pumped about going there, eating all the delicious foods there. We're doing some cool activities. We're going to ride ATV. We got eFoil, if you guys don't know what that is, like an electronic board. It's pretty dope. You guys check it out. And, we're doing a luau. We're doing like all the touristy shit. I don't care if it's corny. Like, I want to do it because I've never been. So I'm personally very, very excited. Wish you guys the best week. And like I said, man, the Wolfpack Patreon is alive and well. We got about 207 people in there right now. I'm talking in there all the time. We got other smart folks in there. People are building like different cool tools based on the ranks that I put out there. So if you guys, like I said, if you guys are really trying to up your game to the next level when it comes to Dynasty, really understand the game theory aspect and just try and play Dynasty, put a different spin on things. I think that's like really what I bring to the table is I force you to think a lot differently than what traditional mediums want you to play the game. And if you play the game my way, you might cause some leagues to fold. That's just the fact. Like 2 or 3 years down the line, like some of your leagues might just fold. People will give up because I might have broken the game for some folks, especially if you're new to Dynasty. But to me, it's still the most profitable and funnest way to play. So if that's your thing, make sure you hop on over the Discord, patreon.com/Our Pack, man. The Wolf Pack is live and well. I can't wait to welcome you guys in there. Also, make sure you hop to bdg.store. Check out the draft guide. We got all the rookie profiles in there, written up by Nick, Noah, and myself. And we're going to keep that as a live, breathing document. And we're going to be dropping other articles like 2022 top wide receivers. We're going to talk about draft strategy. Probably do a write-up this year about the productive struggle, which I tweet and talk about so much in my Patreon. But a lot of things, man. A lot of things coming your way. So make sure you guys hop on over there. There will be something for you, right? If you're hardcore Dynasty, rock with me in the Wolfpack Patreon. There's also other stuff on bdg.store. And, we're just trying to cater to the market, man. We're trying to get you guys, something for everybody. So whatever it is, I'm sure you'll find it with the Big Dogs crew. We'll be happy to have you and welcome you. But that's all I got for you guys this week. Until next week, man, I'll see you guys next time for another episode of Market Watch Mondays. Peace.